Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time thanks to your generous support, shares and views, with multiple uploads every week to help share the rich history of monsters, locations and mythologies of D&D. Dark Ones, Dark Creepers, Dark Stalkers, the Darklings have been around since the first Fiend Folio was published back in 1981. And let's talk about the backstory behind the Fiend Folio for a moment, because this might be of interest to you. The Fiend Folio was published by Games Workshop. Yes, Warhammer 40,000 tabletop games powerhouse Games Workshop. Back in the 1970s, Games Workshop published White Dwarf magazine, and there was a regular feature of that publication called the Fiend Factory column, which detailed new AD&D monsters, many of them created by gamers who read the magazine. In late 1979, the Fiend Folio was complete and ready for publication, intended to be the second volume of the monster manual for first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. At that time, Games Workshop was the holder of the license to publish D&D game products in the United Kingdom. But a business dispute between Games Workshop and TSR Hobbies delayed publication of the book for nearly 2 years. The bulk of monsters in the Fiend Folio came from British contributors, all of whom are acknowledged in the index. The Githyanki, designed by Charles Stross, within the pages of White Dwarf, has become one of the most popular monstrous races in the game. Ian Livingstone, creator of Fighting Fantasy, Choose Your Own Adventure books, created a lot of the monsters, which have become D&D classics. The publication of Fiend Factory Monsters had one unintended side effect for Citadel Miniatures, who had the contract to produce games miniatures based on White Dwarf features. As a condition of including factory monsters in the folio, Games Workshop transferred the copyright on those monsters to TSR, who already had an exclusive contract with Grenadier Models. This forced Citadel to discontinue miniatures depicting factory monsters that appeared in the folio. Who knows what sort of shape the gaming industry would be in today if they had continued to work together. But then, perhaps Warhammer Fantasy and 40k would never have taken off like it did, so it is what it is. But I thought you might find it interesting to get a little more insight into the Fiend Folio and the origin of it, plus all those classic creatures found there. The Dark Ones, Darklings, are a fascinating race of humanoids who are detailed in the great ecology article in Dragon Magazine 322, published in 2004. The 5th edition version are found in Volo's Guide to Monsters and have been recreated as fey creatures, afflicted with some ancient curse by the Summer Queen of the Seelie Court. Well, that would be fine if the writers ever thought to get into any detail about the Seelie and Unseelie courts and what they are, or who the lords and ladies of the courts are. There seems to be, on the one hand, a love of the fey nobility in the classic world of fairy mythos, and on the other hand, well, take a look at what happened to the origin story of the elves in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. Not one mention of the Lachey, not one mention of the creator race or the Days of Thunder. So forgive me if I contradict the account of Volothamp and instead tell you of the real Dark Ones, because the truth is far more interesting. The race is divided into 2 types. The Dark Creepers are small, averaging 4 feet tall, with cloven-hoofed digigrade feet like a satyr. The stats of them in Volo's Guide are correct, so not much needs to be said about that, aside from a couple of points. First, they don't have dark vision. They never have. They are technically willfully blind, with uniformly grey eyes that have tiny cat-like pupils. They don't rely on their eyes to sense their surroundings, though they instead have an acute sense of smell and hearing, like a grimlock, and can operate just fine in total darkness. Now, when I say they are willfully blind, that really needs some explanation, and it's tied to the unique culture of the Darklings, so I'll go into this in more detail in a moment. Dark Creepers are not the young version. They do not undergo a magical ritual that transforms them, and while they are prone to being more like the servants of their larger kin, as a race the Darklings are so adverse to having any sort of authoritarian roles that they would never consider their relationship as master and servants, more like custodians and helpers. There are always more Dark Creepers in any given population of their people than the Dark Stalkers, so to an outsider it seems like the larger Dark Stalkers are in charge. This is not the case. Both types of Darkling operate together out of preference, and the Darklings tend to defer to the more wise and charismatic Dark Stalkers. This physiological difference in their species is entirely natural to them. If there was ever any reason for it, such knowledge has never been recorded, and most likely certainly is of no interest to the Darklings themselves. For them, they have no need of anything telling them how things are. Again, this relates directly to their fascinating culture. Dark Stalkers could be mistaken for Shadowkai elves if someone didn't know that they were looking at a different species entirely. They're tall as a regular human, and since all Darklings prefer to keep their body almost entirely covered in robes, hoods, wrappings, and scarves, along with an assortment of patchwork leather armor, their true appearance is something of a mystery to most denizens of the Underdark. One reason for this is the habit of Darklings to always retrieve their dead, and the fact that their bodies once fallen always decay so rapidly. Originally, this happened over the course of a few days, and if one observed closely, they could see tendrils of dark mist that could be seen wafting up out of the body, and it slowly almost evaporated into the darkness. Now, in more recent times, the bodies have actually started to spontaneously decay all at once, and it looks like they're bursting into, well, it seems like they're bursting into flame. From Volo's point of view, it seems like the bodies are exploding and turning instantly to ash, and his observation that those who say they saw this happen reported being blinded by it temporarily led him to assume that the bodies must have absorbed light and released it all when they die. That's not what happens, though the effects statistic-wise are the same. The bodies are in fact releasing darkness, and the blinding effect is caused by darkness, not light. If absorbing light was so harmful to Darklings, why is there no evidence that they are physically vulnerable to light, other than it causing them visual distress? But we can forgive Volo his shortcomings. Darklings believe that the most enduring and inevitable state of reality is darkness, that everything began in darkness and all will return to darkness. Darkness is the natural state of the universe, and everything else is just temporary and largely pointless. They believe that the sun is evil. Brutish surface dwellers who bring the hated light into their darkness were given the means to make light by the sun and its wicked servant gods. Darklings are not religious, but they venerate darkness as though it was almost an entity. They truly feel comfortable and secure in total darkness and automatically hate light and anyone that brings it with them. If you walk into their presence with a torch or lantern, you are, from their point of view, an enemy of darkness and therefore an enemy of them. Darklings have a lifespan that's similar to humans, and they reproduce the same sort of way. They are mature at the age of 15, and the creepers live on average 50 years, while the stalkers live 75 or more. Again, this may be why Volo refers to them as elders. It's just because they live longer. It's not because they're in charge. They're omnivorous. They eat a very wide variety of things found in the Underdark, and thanks to their absolute refusal to ever light a fire, they eat a lot of raw food, which they don't actually prefer. In rare instances, you'll find them near a steam vent or magical heat source that doesn't shed any light, which allows them to cook their food. But other than that, they usually just steal cooked, preserved, smoked, and otherwise prepared foods from other species. Darklings raid and steal to survive. They feel absolutely no guilt or sense of wrongness about this. In fact, they consider it only rational, the only rational way to live. Having no written record of their culture, no tales of heroism, no sense of ambition, other races of the Underdark consider Darklings to be a race of cutthroat thieves and cowards. Darklings are of the firm opinion that the only thing you get from changing your environment to house you is that it makes you much easier for your enemies to find. That writing anything down is as good as handing your secrets to your enemies, and that ideals are only going to get you killed for no reason at all. They are, culturally, chaotic, neutral, and alignment. They have no laws, but it is considered a very strong taboo to kill others of their own kind, and none of them steal from each other, knowing that the only that kind of only takes what they need to survive. They only take what they need to survive, so taking from others is as good as killing them. And, of course, in a culture of pickpockets and backstabbers and thieves, it's largely pointless because they'll end up just taking from each other. As they detest fire, they do not forge metals, but they certainly value any metal tools and weapons that they can get their hands on. They hate blacksmiths, but those in their society with magical abilities can craft several kinds of deadly weapon if they have the right resources, and they are the masters of alchemical craft. So there's a couple of types of particularly assassin daggers that they're quite synonymous with having, and you'll usually find them with short swords and daggers, usually coated with poison. And any spells that the magicians and wizards of their kind use are usually clouds, obscuring, shadowy, illusion, that sort of thing. They're extremely knowledgeable about how to extract pigments and dyes from plants, fungus, animals, and minerals in the Underdark, and make some very special alchemical items, as well as altering any fabrics to be more suitable shades of black. They use brown mold, ground up and neutralized with a combination of limestone and algae. When exposed to air, the sticky goop revives the brown mold and sucks the heat from wherever it's touching and the surrounding 5-foot space, inflicting 1d6 points of cold damage for that round only. The Darklings call this brown mold oil, and it comes in flasks and pod skins weighing 1 pound, and you might find it in an Underdark market for about 75 gold pieces. Oil of Nausea is 15 gold less expensive, again weighs around a pound and is made of a variety of very disgusting smelling ingredients, with a DC 15 constitution saving throw to avoid being sickened for 1d4 rounds if you get the stuff directly on you, or only 1 round if you happen to be adjacent to the space that this stuff is splashed on when it gets sloshed out of its container. Poison Friend is fairly infamous, quite hard to come by. Poison Friend costs 50 gold and looks like a harmless spore sack, about the size of, it's a puffball the size of a golf ball, that when it strikes with enough force, squirts out spores in a 10-foot cloud. Anyone inside that cloud who fails the DC 15 constitution save won't notice any effect, and the cloud dissipates within 1 round. But for the next 10 minutes, those affected save against all other poisons with a disadvantage. This stuff is hard to notice. Most surface folk have never heard of it, and understandably, any assassin would give their eye teeth to get a supply of it. The price for a dose of this within the city of Waterdeep is 100 times what you might expect to pay for it in Menzo Baranzan. Shadow Haze powder also makes a 10-foot cloud, except this is very noticeable as it badly obscures the eyes with thread-like mycelial hyphae on a failed DC 15 constitution save, and the victim will be in a fair bit of discomfort. I mean, they've got fungus growing in their eyes. They suffer disadvantage on all checks that require any form of sight and will be very keen to flush this stuff from their eyes pronto, which requires no less than a full gallon of water. If you don't manage to do this within an hour, they will be blinded until their vision can be magically restored. It's quite horrifically painful. This stuff is not very hard to make, so it is cheap and commonplace in Underdark markets. A single dose bag costs no more than 30 gold. Last one on this list is always found on Darklings, and that is Shadow Veil Dust. Actually finely ground black crystals found only in the Underdark. They throw this at any flames to instantly snuff them out. Any non-magical fire no larger than a campfire will be snuffed out, but this doesn't prevent the fires from being reignited the following round, given the means. While these items can be found in markets, the Darklings are not the ones selling them. They rarely trade with any other race and don't speak with them either. It is a deeply rooted cultural taboo among them to basically, they never reveal themselves physically or mentally to any other race. They always conceal their appearance in robes and fabrics. They never teach their language to any other individual who is not a Darkling. Their language, like their natural voice, is never loud. Even when they're distressed, and they are incapable of shouting. The words of the Darkling tongue are more like punctuated breathy sighs, and meaning is conveyed by subtle changes in tone. As they live in darkness, they're not accustomed to making any sort of facial gestures and make no gestures with their body. They always move in a very stealthy manner. All of the games they play as children are variations of hide and seek. They carry what they need, live only in the most out-of-the-way places, avoiding antagonizing the local population more than they have to, will always find ways to coexist and even find mutual benefit from hunting alongside such things as shocker lizards, rasts, rust monsters, cloakers, dark mantles, troglodytes, dire weasels, among others. An alliance between were-rats and darklings is mutually beneficial, and they can often be found in the extensive sewer networks underneath ancient city streets. Of course, the Darklings will never come to the surface unless it's an overcast and moonless night. They tend to fit their role as the secretive bandits of the Underdark superbly well, and are quite content to be just that, nothing more. They do not leave monuments or graves. They raid caravans of travellers and merchants by preference, and because it is unlikely to invoke any sort of local reprisal, particularly if they manage not to murder everyone and only take what they need, which will be most metal goods, most preserved and cooked food, items of clothing, and such things as spellbooks and rare components that they can study and master themselves. They have little desire for gold and no interest in jewels, and Volo's assertion that they love works of art and beauty is complete fabrication. Darklings love darkness. Dark vision is far more common now in the game than it was before, and sometimes this is kind of a problem to the point where there might be one or two characters in a particular party of adventurers who don't have the ability to see in darkness. There are some narrative tricks to get around this. First of all, dark vision used to be called infravision, which simply used a different spectrum of light, and creatures that switched to the spectrum did actually have eyes that glowed softly red, hence the old artwork with critters with red glowing eyes. However, this was different from low light vision, which was simple light sensitivity, such as the vision of a cat. Elves were always the race I associated with low light vision. Now, dark vision, well, it's actually very vague. The creatures who have it can see things in shades of grey, kind of implying that this is simply low-light vision, a function of the cone structures of the eyes rather than the colour-sensitive rods. Well, sometimes vague rules are a narrator's friend, because with a lack of concrete physical explanation, you can come up with all sorts of things that negate dark vision. First, dark vision cannot see through magical darkness. You can say any supernatural darkness, or even any abnormal amounts of darkness. In a room full of dust and mist, dark vision can't see through that. And it's a relatively simple negative illumination given off by a widespread underdark fungus, say that's cultivated by the Darklings. And if the easiest way to get rid of it is to burn off the stuff, well, what a lovely setup for a very aggressive run-in with some Darklings. First, you have invaded their territory, you've brought accursed fire with you, you've destroyed their sacred mushrooms of darkness. Well, that's all grounds for death for sure. Now turn the lights down low. Speak in hushed tones. Describe the smells and textures of things. Describe every sound the player characters can hear. Immerse them in their other senses as they are denied the ability to see. In an area dominated by creatures who were born into darkness and have every intention of returning to it in death. Just a reminder, if you've not subscribed already, feel free to do so, and be sure to hit that notification bell as I upload from the other side of the world sometime in your future. For access to all the scripts and 1 week advance access to these videos, consider becoming a patron of the channel on Patreon for a minimum of just $1 per month. Well, I'll probably go to 1 week in advance next month. This month they've had a couple of they've had exclusive access to a couple of videos very early, and one video which nobody's going to see unless they're a patron, which is the whispering of what the Alip was saying in the Alip video. Join the community on our Discord server. Come say hi. You might actually have a chance to game with others who watch this channel and have a similar love of the lore of the game. There's some quality people on there for sure. If you want to pick up a new video game at a significant daily discount, come and help me out in the process, check out the daily deal on Chrono. I'm also uploading these videos to BitChute as well, which has got a direct PayPal donation service if you ever wanted to do it that way instead of subscribing to Patreon. If you want to just do a one-off thing, much appreciated. Link down below in the video description text. As always, thanks for listening. I'll be back with more for you very soon.